Action is what it's all about. You've got to get to taking an intelligent act. It's friction. Clausewitz's term, he called it friction. The Marine Corps, I like this definition. I apologize for the Marine Corps doctrine, but let me read it. Friction may be mental, as with indecision over a course of action. It may be external, imposed by enemy action or mere chance. It may be self-induced, caused by such factors as lack of a clearly defined goal, lack of coordination, or unclear or complicated plans. So what it basically means is anything that messes up your mojo is friction. How did they break it down? The one part of this definition I do not like is mere chance. We live in a Newtonian universe. There is cause and effect. By and large, everything has some reason. Usually, if it's mere chance, what it means is you didn't know it was going to happen. It was going to happen. You just didn't know about it. The other problem is systems. Everything's interconnected. We live in a world of systems and systems within systems, one of the current buzzwords. So it's about understanding that if I do this, they're going to do that, or if somebody else does this, it's going to affect that, and we've got these different things going on. These are all sources of friction. And the third thing in here is there's people. Parties, if you're doing rule of law, it's going to be parties as in organizations, groups of people. But even within those groups, there's individuals who have their own agenda. As far as others, the enemy action, that's straightforward. We know if they're the enemy, if there are opposing counsels, whoever they are, they're going to try and mess with our stuff. But what about this self-induced stuff? Lack of a clearly defined goal, that's something that's going to pop up again. People say this again and again. I do not have a lot of time to focus on purpose in this version of the lecture, but I'll give you a reference you can go to if you're interested in ensuring you have a clearly defined goal, because that is one of the essentials in being able to plan effectively. Unclear or complicated plans, I'm going to show you how to make very clear, very uncomplicated plans. And mental indecision over a course of action. That is just the analysis paralysis. That's spending too much time on the first 3 steps of the OODA loop. I want to collect more information, I want to better understand it, let's make sure we're picking the right decision, and not actually taking action. So those are things you can self-inflict. Let's talk about these with a little bit more depth. Adversaries, as I said, they're going to try and mess with you. They want to be unpredictable. They don't want you to know what they're doing, so they're going to try and thwart you. But they're also going to make mistakes. You may go into some situation saying, well, if they're smart, this is what they're going to do. So I'm banking that that's what they're going to do. They do something that is not what you expected. It may not be that they're some Machiavellian genius. They might have just screwed up. They didn't know the smart thing to do, so they did something else. You got to kind of plan for that when people can make mistakes. Allies. I'm going to give a quick example that will tie in later, so just so you don't think I'm wasting too much time. During the trial of defendant, it was he said, she said, so they had to put him on the stand so he could say, and then he was going to be followed by a number of character witnesses, one of whom was his wife. So he took the stand, and while he was out there, the trial counsel drew out his whole story, which he probably hadn't thought through as well as he should have. But along the way, the question came up, all right, the movies end around midnight, you and your wife put the kids to bed, your wife goes to sleep, this is what he said during the testimony, and then you clean up the house and you decide, I'm going to bring the potato chips over. Didn't you think she'd probably be asleep by that time? Why were you bringing potato chips back at 2 in the morning when you could have just given them to her the next day? And he said, look, I just wanted to get them out of the house, and I knew if she was asleep, I could just leave them on their front steps. We live in base housing. No one's going to steal her potato chips, and maybe that's a loss I was willing to take if it actually happened. Well, what about wild animals? This was in Southern California. There's coyotes running around. Do you want her to wake up and find a coyote gnawing on a bunch of trash on her front step in the morning? That's kind of dangerous. Oh, there's no animals in base housing. The jury probably knew that one was not so true. But, so in any event, so he sits down. Later on, his wife takes a stand. She's been out of the courtroom. She doesn't know what he said. She is clearly supporting her husband very strongly. Everything the trial counsel tries to suggest might have happened, she works very hard to undermine. So the trial counsel knows her agenda, knows what she's all about, knows what she's trying to achieve. So he presents the flip side. So, Mrs. Defendant, if you're trying to return potato chips to someone's house, you don't need to go inside their house, do you? You can just leave them outside. No, I couldn't. Well, why not? You don't have animals in base housing, do you? Yeah, we do. In fact, on my way to the courthouse this morning, there was a coyote in the middle of the road. So, unintentionally, she was his ally. She was trying to support him, but she unintentionally undermined him. All right, the second point is divergent goals. You will especially find this in rule of law. That interpreter, who is your best friend, who's helping you do everything, he has goals outside of supporting the interests of the United States. There's other things he's trying to do. Everybody you deal with has divergent goals. When you have witnesses, oh, so-and-so is coming in to be my character witness, that doesn't mean they're 100% simpatico with everything that you're trying to achieve. You got to understand that at some point, they're going to kind of veer off to the side. You can't expect them to be 100% in line with what you're trying to achieve. The flip side of that is, and someone wrote an entire book about this, Co-opetition by Dixon and Nailbuff, your adversaries. You can co-opt your adversaries to achieve certain things when your goals are in line. We did this in Iraq with the Muslim, the Brotherhoods in the Fallujah, in the Sunni Triangle. All right, hey, you don't like us, we don't especially like you, but tell you what, we'll give you guns and ammo if you just kill the Al-Qaeda guys. All right, we're enemies, but we had one goal in common, and we were able to sort of leverage that to achieve very positive effects. So that's again understanding the interplay of things and understanding people's goals. Lastly, there's yourself. You can do a lot of stuff to mess yourself up, but one of the primary things just is understanding bounded rationality. Now this applies to everybody. Bounded rationality is the very simple concept that everyone's limited by their own IQ, but also by the amount of time they have to make a decision and the amount of information available. So there's ways you can overcome this, and we're going to cover that pretty quickly. But first, let's move on. We've talked about parties. Let's talk a little bit about information issues. There's a few different issues. First, I want to talk about the fog of war. Well, close what's called the fog of war. You may have experienced the fog of trial, not knowing everything that's going on, not knowing why the witness is saying something totally different than he said to you the day before. Information issues kind of break down into two different things. And people have laughed at these terms. These terms make sense, and it's good that you understand, especially the second point. But first you have your known unknowns. Gee, I really wish I knew that. I wish I knew what that guy's agenda was as I'm doing my rule of law planning. I wish I knew what this witness, this hostile witness, was going to say when we actually put him on the stand. I wish I knew if the defense was really going to contest this case, because I'd start prepping it now, but I don't know, and I got other things I got to do. So that pretty much covers your ambiguity and your currently unavailable information. I don't think I need to spend time on contradictory, because if you've had 2 eyewitnesses to one event, you know you're going to get contradictory information even from people who don't have any agenda. Then you've got your unknown unknowns. Now these are the things that are going to blindside you. You've got no idea about, for instance, all right, you knew something, but what you knew was either wrong or you misinterpreted it. The defense counsel knew that Mrs. V said she locked her front door and that defendant had walked through that front door. Turns out defendant didn't walk through the front door. At least the jury agreed with the trial counsel. Defendant came in through the back door. What they knew was wrong. They were blindsided. They did not put on an effective defense because of an unknown unknown. Relevance of unknown data. All right, the defense, in the case study, they knew the house had a back door. They knew defendant was over there getting potato chips. They did not connect the dots to say, all right, that could possibly interfere with our theory of the case. All right, outside of just what you know and don't know, you got to understand information asymmetry. Everyone's got a different bucket of information at their disposal. Aside from the fact that this witness knows something that witness doesn't know, and your client's not telling you everything that he knows, there's asymmetry built into the trial process. Now, I had a lot of arguments about this when I was at the JAG school, and everyone's like, oh, the glass is half full. It's all about justice. It's all about putting everything out there. Well, no, it's not, because you are not going up to the opposing counsel saying, oh, here's all my notes. Here's my theory of the case. Here's what we're going to do to your witnesses on cross-exam. There is built-in asymmetry. There's things you know that they don't know. There's things they know that you don't know. And of course, at the same time, outside of my Venn diagram, there's plenty of people who know all kinds of stuff that you may not find out about until too late.